All right, be honest. How many of you hit snooze this morning, already dreading the week ahead? You know
Yeah.
that feeling, right? Like trading dreams for a car payment and 2 days off. It's like we're all
Well,
just kind of on autopilot, living a life someone else wrote for us,
yeah, that feeling, that dissonance,
Yeah.
that's exactly what M.J. DeMarco tackles in his book, Unscripted. It's this idea that society kind of subtly pushes us
Mhm.
towards this pre-programmed life of just obedience and scraping by. He calls it living by the script.
So we're diving into Unscripted today. It's a pretty hefty read. We've got your notes, some highlighted passages, and of course the book itself. What are we hoping to really understand by the end of this deep dive?
Well, the goal is to really unpack DeMarco's argument, see if there's really something to it.
Hmm.
Is it really the scriptee running in the background of our lives? And if so, how do we rewrite it?
So DeMarco starts off with the scene of watching commuters in Chicago, feeling like they were all just robots going through the motions. He even calls it conditioned instinct. Does that resonate with you at all?
Absolutely. It's like we're conditioned to accept this idea of a 9-to-5 grind, 401k contributions,
Yeah.
and delayed gratification till retirement. But where did that come from? Did we consciously choose this path?
Right. And that's where this concept of the scriptee comes in. DeMarco calls it a societal operating system, which kind of sounds ominous when you put it like that.
Think of it as the default programming we're all born into, this set of beliefs and expectations about work, success, money, even happiness that are just constantly reinforced by the world around us.
And he says the scriptee is everywhere. I mean, we hear it from our parents, we see it on TV, even our education system seems to reinforce it, right?
Exactly. DeMarco calls these sources of the script seeders. He breaks them down into two categories: compromise parties and prejudice parties.
Let's unpack that a bit. Who are these compromised parties? Are they like the villains in this story?
Not necessarily villains. They're often the people closest to us, like our family and friends. They might tell us to get a safe job, go to college, save for retirement. All with the best intentions, of course.
But they're unknowingly perpetuating this scriptee, even if it hasn't led to their own fulfillment, really.
Sure, they're compromised
Yeah.
because they're operating within the limits of their own scriptee. The key takeaway here is to recognize that even well-intentioned advice can sometimes be based on fear and outdated beliefs.
So we need to kind of filter advice through that lens. Is this truly empowering me, or is it just keeping me on this pre-programmed path?
Exactly.
Okay, so then the prejudiced parties, you said those are a bit different. Who are we talking about here?
So these are the institutions or individuals who actually benefit from keeping us on the scriptee. DeMarco identifies 6 main ones. First, we've got those friends and family we just discussed. They might not be intentionally prejudiced, of course, but they're often unknowingly reinforcing the scriptee.
Yeah, and we talked about their intentions are good, but it's still important to be aware of their potential biases.
Absolutely. The second seeder is the education system. DeMarco argues that it often prioritizes obedience and conformity over critical thinking and creativity.
He even says it conditions us to become good employees, not necessarily fulfilled individuals.
Right, and it often pushes this idea that a college degree is the only path to success.
Yeah.
Even when it leads to, massive debt and limited job prospects in certain fields.
So the takeaway here is to question the status quo. Think critically about the messages we're receiving, even from seemingly authoritative sources.
Exactly. The third seeder
Yeah.
is corporate advertising, which bombards us with messages
Yeah.
that link happiness to consumption.
It's that classic, buy this product and your life will be perfect.
Narrative,
Yeah.
right. And it creates this insatiable desire for more stuff, even if it doesn't truly bring us lasting fulfillment. So the takeaway, be mindful of how consumerism can hijack our desires and keep us on the hedonic treadmill.
Don't let those commercials
Yeah.
write your life story. Okay, so that's 3 down. Who's next on this list of scriptee seeders?
The fourth is the financial industry, which often promotes a slow and steady approach to building wealth, working for decades, saving diligently, investing in the stock market, and hoping for the best.
But DeMarco points out that this benefits them more than it benefits us. They make money off our investments and retirement funds, whether we see substantial returns or not.
Exactly. The key takeaway here is to be skeptical of financial advice, especially from those who haven't achieved the financial freedom they're preaching.
Do your own research. Don't blindly trust the so-called experts. Okay, who's next?
The fifth is the government, which relies on a predictable, tax-paying workforce to keep the system running.
DeFarco even uses that somewhat controversial Obama quote, if you own a business, you didn't build that. to highlight how the government often downplays individual effort and ingenuity.
Right, and whether you agree with that interpretation or not, it raises an interesting question about the balance between individual initiative
Yeah.
and government support.
Makes you wonder, whose interests are really being served here? So the takeaway is to be aware of how government policies and narratives can subtly influence our perception of work and success.
Exactly, and the sixth and final cedar is the media. DeMarco argues that. They often distract us with sensationalized stories and celebrity gossip, keeping us entertained and consuming, but not necessarily informed or engaged.
It's like they're profiting from our attention while keeping us from focusing on the bigger picture.
Exactly. The takeaway here is to be discerning consumers of media. Be critical of the information you're consuming and seek out diverse perspectives.
Okay, so we've got these six cedars constantly whispering the scripted tea in our ears. But before we dive into how to break free, DeMarco introduces this concept of hyperrealities. What are those?
These are the illusions that the script teases to keep us in line. They're distortions of reality that we often accept without question, like believing we need a fancy car to be successful, or that a college degree guarantees a fulfilling career. DeMarco calls these, he calls these hyperrealities, and they're essentially the sneaky tactics the script uses to keep us playing by its rules.
So it's not just about the cedar spreading the script tea. It's also about these hyperrealities that make it seem like the script tea is the only way to live.
Exactly. It's like they create this warped reality where the script tease seems inevitable.
Yeah.
And DeMarco outlines 9 key hyperrealities that are especially powerful.
Okay, let's pull back the curtain on these hyperrealities. What's the first one?
So the first one is this concept of named days, which we touched on a bit earlier. It's this idea that our lives have to be divided into weekdays for work
Yeah.
and weekends for play.
Yeah, it's so ingrained in our culture that we rarely even question it. But DeMarco challenges us to see it for what it is, right?
Yeah.
An arbitrary construct, not a law of nature.
Right. He even shares an anecdote
Uh-huh.
about watching a horror movie on a Tuesday morning while his business was making money in the background. It's like a playful jab at the rigidity of the traditional work week.
It's a good reminder that we have more control over our time than we often think we do. What's the next hyperreality on DeMarco's list?
Next up is consumerism.
Yeah.
It's this pervasive belief that happiness and success are directly tied to what we own. It's the classic keeping up with the Joneses mentality.
And it's fueled by those corporate cedars, constantly telling us we need the latest gadget, the newest fashion, the bigger house to finally be happy.
Yeah. DeMarco even talks about buying a Lamborghini, not to impress others, but as kind of a social experiment. And guess what? It changed how people treated him, even though he was still the same person.
If consumerism basically tricks us into believing that material possessions equal happiness and status, when in reality, it's often just a fleeting feeling.
Yeah. The real takeaway here is to be mindful of what truly brings you joy and fulfillment. Don't let your happiness be dictated by advertising and societal pressures.
Don't let those commercials write your life story.
Right.
Okay, so that's 2 down. What's next?
The third one hits close to home for many of us, the college degree. The hyper-reality here is that a college degree is the only path to a good job, financial security, and even intelligence.
Yeah, but we all know people who haven't gone to college, who are incredibly successful. And let's be honest, a degree doesn't automatically make you smart or guarantee a fulfilling career.
Right. DeMarco argues that the education system often prioritizes credentials over actual learning and critical thinking. And the cost of college is skyrocketing, leaving many graduates saddled with debt and few job prospects in their chosen fields.
So the takeaway is, be strategic about your education. Don't just go to college because it's what everyone else is doing. Weigh the costs and benefits, explore alternative paths, and focus on developing valuable skills.
Now, this next hyper-reality is closely tied to the college degree, the job. The illusion here is that a good job is the key to security, stability, and even identity.
It's like we're defined by our job titles. But what happens when that job isn't fulfilling, or even worse, when you lose it?
Well, DeMarco encourages us to detach our sense of worth and identity from our jobs. He argues that true security comes from having multiple income streams, valuable skills, and a mindset of adaptability.
Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Diversify your income, invest in your skills, be prepared to pivot.
Right, and this leads us to another hyper-reality that often goes hand in hand with the job, debt. The illusion here is that debt is a normal and necessary part of life.
It's almost like we're expected to be in debt. Student loans, car loans, mortgages, it's become so normalized
Yeah.
that we rarely even question it.
Yeah, but DeMarco argues that debt is a form of financial slavery. It limits our options, forces us to stay in jobs we might hate, and prevents us from pursuing our true passions.
It's a powerful trap. That keeps us tethered to the script T. So the takeaway is to be extremely mindful of debt. Avoid it whenever possible. And if you do have debt, prioritize paying it off as quickly as you can.
The next hyper-reality DeMarco tackles is retirement. Script T tells us to work hard for decades, save diligently, and then finally enjoy freedom in our golden years.
Okay.
But there's a flaw in this plan.
Yeah. It assumes we'll even make it to retirement in good health and with enough money to live comfortably. And what about all those years we sacrifice for this elusive future?
Exactly. DeMarco challenges us to rethink this traditional model of retirement. He encourages us to design lives that integrate work, leisure, and purpose throughout our lives, not just in some distant future.
So don't wait for retirement to start living. Find ways to incorporate joy, passion, and meaning into your life right now.
The seventh hyper-reality DeMarco discusses is the equation of money with wealth. The script tells us that having a lot of money is the ultimate measure of success.
But true wealth encompasses so much more than just money, right? It's about having time freedom, loving relationships, good health, a sense of purpose.
DeMarco reminds us that money is simply a tool. It's how you use that tool that determines your true wealth.
So the takeaway is to redefine what wealth means to you. Don't just chase money. Pursue experiences, relationships, and a life that aligns with your values.
That's a powerful shift in perspective.
Okay, what are the last two hyper-realities on DeMarco's list?
The eighth hyper-reality is approval. It's this. Deep-seated need for external validation and acceptance. We seek approval from our parents, our peers, our bosses, even strangers on social media.
It's like we're constantly seeking validation from outside sources instead of trusting
our own inner compass.
Yeah, and this need for approval can be paralyzing. It keeps us from taking risks, expressing our true selves, and pursuing our passions.
So the takeaway is to cultivate self-acceptance
and
self-love. Your worth isn't determined by what others think of you. And the final hyperreality DeMarco addresses is failure, the script tells us. To avoid failure at all costs, it's seen as a catastrophic event, a sign of weakness, or incompetence.
But failure is an inevitable part of life, and especially entrepreneurship.
Exactly. DeMarco encourages us to reframe our perspective on failure, see it as a learning opportunity, a stepping stone to success.
So instead of fearing failure, embrace it as feedback, learn from your mistakes, and keep iterating.
So we've now uncovered all 9 hyperrealities, these illusions that distort our perception of reality and keep us tethered to the scripty. But how do we break free from these deeply ingrained beliefs and create a life that's truly unscripted?
So we've got the scripty, this like underlying societal program pushing us towards a conventional life, and we've exposed those hyperrealities, the illusions that make the scripty seem like the only option. It's a bit bleak, to be honest. Is there any way to break free from all of this?
Well, that's where the exciting part comes in.
Yeah.
DeMarco doesn't just diagnose the problem, he offers a solution. He calls it the unscripted life.
Unscripted. It's like throwing out the rule book and writing your own story. I like the sound of that. But how do we actually make that shift?
DeMarco's big idea is that entrepreneurship is the key to escaping the scripty. Now, hold on. He's not saying everyone needs to start a traditional business.
Yeah, I was about to say, I'm not exactly cut out to be the next tech mogul.
Right. It's more about cultivating an unscripted mindset. No matter what you do, it's about being proactive, taking ownership, and creating value instead of just trading time for money.
So even if I'm not starting a company, I can still apply these entrepreneurial principles to my life.
Absolutely. Think about it. The scripty wants us to be passive, obedient consumers. Entrepreneurship is the opposite. It's about being creative, resourceful, and constantly seeking opportunities.
Okay, yeah, that's starting to make sense. So how do we actually cultivate this unscripted mindset? What are the concrete steps?
Well, DeMarco lays out a framework, he calls it, the unscripted entrepreneurial framework. It's a bit too detailed to get into here. But the core idea is that we need to build assets that generate income without trading our time directly for money.
So things like online businesses, investments, royalties from creative work, things that can generate income even while we're sleeping.
Exactly. DeMarco calls these systems. They allow us to break free from the 9-to-5 grind and the limitations of the scriptee. But it's not just about the money.
Right, there's got to be more to the unscripted life than just financial freedom.
It's about designing a life
Yeah.
that aligns with your values and passions. It's about having the freedom to spend your time doing what you love, with the people you love, without being tethered to a job you hate.
I feel like this deep dive has really opened my eyes. We started with that feeling of something is wrong, and now we've got this whole new framework for living. It's a lot to process.
It is a lot. But the key takeaway is this. You have a choice. You can choose to continue living by the script, or you can choose to rewrite your story.
And if you're feeling that sense of dissonance, that nagging feeling that there's got to be more to life, DeMarco's book, Unscripted, might just be the blueprint you need.
It's a call to action, to question the status quo,
Yeah.
challenge those hyper-realities, and start building a life that's truly your own goal.
So for all you listeners out there who are tired of hitting the snooze button and dreading Monday morning, remember this. You are not a robot. You are not a cog in a machine. You have the power to choose your own adventure.
Go out there and write an amazing, unscripted story